Yeah, thank you, firstly, RIBA, for inviting me. I'm afraid I haven't got the architectural knowledge of our previous mayor. My first degree was in astrophysics, so its proximity to architecture is only alphabetical. Although I hope it sort of gives me a bit of a big picture. And also, I sat in on an excellent session that we've just had, where people were travelling all over the world. All I can say is look out the window in something that's a little bit more parochial. So housing was the big offer in terms of the Bristol election last year, where Marvin Rees, the mayoral candidate, promised to build 800 affordable homes a year by 2020, 2,000 a year overall. And that's often quoted, but what we actually said is we didn't want just to build housing. We wanted to build balanced communities, and we wanted to rebalance some of the unbalanced communities that we already have. The easiest thing to do, really, is to build lots of affordable housing where there already is lots of affordable housing, and allow the development sector to build lots of gated communities in the centre of Bristol. And that isn't what we're about. And it's why infrastructure is also key to thinking about, when you're looking at a city, what do we mean by a balanced community across the city. Some of you will be familiar with this map. It's the Joint Spatial Plan, which is going out for its last of many stages of consultation at the end of the autumn, hopefully for adoption before Easter. And this is 4 authorities trying to work together to agree something. And certainly for Bristol, Bath and North East Somerset and South Gloucestershire, matching where new housing is to the transport infrastructure is absolutely critical. For North Somerset, avoiding touching the green belt is the most critical thing. And so building housing that isn't necessarily linked to the transport infrastructure is the consequence of that. And I know RIBA's been involved in debates about the green belt. For me, one of the worst things about the green belt is the word green, in that actually it certainly is a belt, but actually not all of it is environmentally of any particular value. And Bristol as a city, its population has more than doubled since the green belt was put in place. And we have an infrastructure, we have the same basic road infrastructure to support the city at that time, and we've got 3 times as many cars as there were when the city was built. So for the city to continue to function, it's really, really crucially important that you can actually move around it and move between the parts of it, which is why the infrastructure is so key. Also, the other thing that's really key about the city is not contained within the boundary of Bristol City Council. A large part of the city is in South Gloucestershire, and as we take forward some of these developments, more of the city will actually be in Bath and North East Somerset too, but certainly not in North Somerset because they don't want that. We've just put in just now a housing and infrastructure fund bid to government, which is very much about linking new housing development opportunities on the outskirts of Bristol in Whitchurch and Hicksgate, with the development of Templemead Station and also the development of the enterprise zone to the east of Templemead Station, and the connectivity between those outskirts and those more central areas. With the A4 within Bristol probably being one of the most congested routes into the city. So we can't separate housing from infrastructure, but I'm now going to do lots of talking about housing, and there's Isabel's on the panel who can talk much more eloquently and knowledgeably about infrastructure than me. So net dwelling completions, this is the figures that my planning department have given me, is in the last financial year, 2016-17, 1994. No, we didn't get that 2000, although we did say by 2020, by 6. Which is particularly annoying because there was a scheme that we're aware of just over 20 units of affordable housing, which has slipped into 17-18 although it will help with the figures for 17, 18. So you could say the market is quite capable in many respects of delivering unit numbers, you know, up to of 2,000. Unfortunately, from my perspective, a debate maybe to have another time, 700 of those were student housing units. So not dealing with the indigenous housing need. And for those who say, well, it stops students living elsewhere, no, it doesn't. Every time we build more student specialist housing, we actually have more of the standard housing taken away, and we can track that through the council tax exemption records. In terms of affordable housing, absolutely pitiful. 199 units, 10% of what was produced overall, which, if tells us nothing else, and you know, I'm talking to you as architects because I'm wanting you to advise your clients for me, if it tells us nothing else, the market cannot deliver affordable housing. The market does not want to deliver affordable housing. I know how hard it is to have got to 199. So if you look at the figures, to get to the mayoral target, I need to build 6 more homes a year by 2020 to get to the 2,000, and 600 more homes a year to get to the 800 affordable. So basically, I can't do that for the private sector. The private sector's not interested. The private sector is in the way of actually delivering that affordable housing target. And so I've got basically, this is transfer infrastructure picture, but I've got basically 3 levers I can use as a local authority to get that extra 600. And they are in this order. You know, the order is important. 1, land. 2, money. 3, planning. The planning system isn't delivering it already and hasn't delivered it for some time. It's not the fault of the planners, I don't think. It's the fault of the way in which the planning system is continually tinkered with by central government. But land is the most important, because it don't matter. If we had a perfect planning system and loads of money, if we had no land, we couldn't build anything. So actually being able to release land is key. At the moment, in terms of housing, there is 200 hectares of allocated housing land within Bristol, although on the back of the JSP, we will go through a review of sites. Half of that is owned by the City Council, which just shows not only that the private sector has land banked or has stalled sites, but also the City Council's been pretty pitiful at getting anything built in the last decade. So in terms of land, I'm now applying a land filter to the release of all of our land. Firstly, can we build it out? For council housing or the new housing company we're setting up, can they build it? If they can't take a site on and can't take a site on soon, then can the registered providers within our local partnership, can they do it? Can it be done through community-led organisations? And only if both of those say no, will we go to the private sector. Why go to a sector that doesn't deliver and can't deliver what we require? And moving on from that, in terms of land, we also need to look much more creatively about the land that we release and the land that we zone in particular ways. We have to make sure that more of our land is available. One of the things that strikes me about Bristol, and I've only lived here for 53 years, so it's taken me a while to reach these conclusions, is that basically it's a city that thinks it's a suburb. In terms of its built form. Most of it is very low density. A lot of it is very low in terms of heights. That's not just housing, that's also industrial and commercial land. And if you look at this area here, which is got Templemead Station in it and the enterprise zone, if you go round the enterprise zone and if you go even further east around St Philip's Marsh, what you see is lots of low-rise buildings surrounded by lots and lots of car parking and open space. We can't afford for that to be the future of the city. The green belt means that we can't move out, so the only option is to intensify within and also to go up. If we can't build on more land, we have to build on more sky, which I know not everybody's comfortable with, but who knows, if we come back in 20 years' time, will that look more like this? without Godzilla or meteorites or anything else landing on it, as often happens. And also we have to look at, it's not just about the centre of Bristol, we also have to look at the outskirts of Bristol. And this is really key in terms of, again, relating back to infrastructure. The low density of places like where I grew up in Hartcliffe has meant that those areas, it's not sustainable to deliver the sort of public transport that's needed by the people of the sort of incomes who live there. They're forced to be car owners, they're forced to drive in, because there isn't a density of population to support a public transport infrastructure, and also within an estate like that to support the infrastructure that exists within there, whether that's shops, whether that's schools, whether that's churches. All that social and economic infrastructure does not exist locally, or has collapsed to a large extent because there isn't enough population there. And in the 50s, when the last time we expanded the city, land was easy to get hold of. You could just CPO loads and loads of farmland, build loads of housing on it. And you didn't really care about how well that land was used. And we used the land really, really badly. And also when we did transport schemes, we've got quite a lot of land trapped by the way we've created our transport infrastructure. In one place in Bristol, we've got a huge roundabout with huge piece of unusable land trapped within it. We have to unlock that land and reconfigure our infrastructure so that we can actually develop more. I know that, you know, if there was twice as many people living on this estate, and particularly if we had a much greater social mix, we would have much less problem getting bus services and other public transport services to it. So in terms of communities, we want, you know, the catchphrase sustainable. I think, you know, particularly environmentally sustainable, mentioned earlier. We need the affordable housing. We need those communities to be well connected. We need them to be balanced and diverse. A lot of those outer estates of Bristol are not any of those things, really. They've got the affordable housing, but nothing else. We need to think about how, when we're looking at urban design, that we design in a way which is healthy, so that means good quality public realm, not just loads of bits of grass. I mean, if you go there, and say, I know I lived there for over 30 years, there's lots of bits of grass. That grass is used to park cars on and for dogs as toilets. So I'm going to be careful what I say. And we actually need quality public realm on estates like this, not loads of bits of field with no actual amenity value. So we need to look at the whole thing. And healthy is about a whole range of things in terms of housing. It's about the thermal efficiency of housing. We're building passive house in a lot of our council housing schemes in Bristol. But it's also about how you travel, how you walk through the estate, how you cycle through the estate, the transport infrastructure, the ability to use the whole of the space. And I'm sure I put the question marks. There's lots of other things too. Isabel's here. She might mention this in questions, but you know, for instance, this is a scheme which you'll be starting on site very soon in the north of the city in Southmead. On an old school site, Dunmel. It will include housing for sale, affordable housing for rent, an ethical private rented offer, ethical PRS, 10-year blind in terms of its development, but also increasing the population of what was a council estate and increasing the diversity of that estate, diversifying the housing offer to hopefully make that community in all sorts of ways more sustainable, not just in an environmental sense. So I know you're all told LinkedIn. Paul Smith's really difficult to find on LinkedIn. You might get some guy from Nottingham who does shirts. But my LinkedIn profile, you type housing Paul, you'll get to me, and there's my Twitter and other things as well. And on that, I will finish. Thank you.